The Family Feud stage was live, and the cameras were rolling when 31-year-old Derek Simmons raised his hand toward his girlfriend's face. Ciara Washington, 28 years old, high school math teacher, a woman who had applied to this show as a gift to Derek because he had told her it was a dream of his, turned her face sideways the way a person turns their face when they have learned, through long and private practice, that this is what comes next. The audience gasped so loudly it sounded like one person. A producer behind the curtain said something sharp into her headset. Steve Harvey took 4 steps from the center podium, placed himself directly between Derek Simmons and Ciara Washington, looked Derek in the eye with an expression that had no performance in it whatsoever, and said 6 words in the quietest, most absolute voice on the stage that afternoon: "Not here." "Security, call the police." Derek's hand was still raised. It lowered. He looked at Steve Harvey's face, and whatever he saw there told him, clearly and finally, that there was nowhere left to go with this. The security guards were already moving. What happened in the next 22 minutes after Derek Simmons was walked off the stage would be seen by 290 million people. And what Ciara Washington did with her microphone in those 22 minutes would change the conversation about domestic violence in American households in ways that researchers are still measuring. It was Wednesday, November 13th, 2019, in Atlanta. The Washington family, Ciara, her mother Yvonne, 54, her 2 brothers Marcus and Darnell, and her college roommate Tasha, had arrived at the studio that morning in a good mood. Good was almost an understatement. Ciara had been planning this trip for 6 months. She had submitted the application secretly. As a surprise, she had told Derek they were going on a trip to Atlanta for the weekend, had coordinated with his mother to make sure he had the days off work, had bought him new shoes for the occasion because she knew he would want to look good on camera. She had done all of this because Derek had told her, 3 years ago, during one of their good periods, that being on Family Feud was something he'd always wanted. She had made it happen. That is the kind of woman Ciara Washington was. She made things happen for the people she loved. But good periods implied other periods. And Ciara Washington had been living in the other periods for 2 of the 3 years she had been with Derek Simmons, in the particular alternating way that made leaving feel impossible. The good periods genuine enough to sustain hope. The bad periods bad enough to leave a mark, both of them cycling in a pattern she had named accurately to herself and not yet named accurately to anyone else. Not her mother. Not her brothers. Not Tasha, who sat 3 feet away from her every Tuesday in the school break room and knew something was wrong in the way friends know things they are not being told. Ciara had been living this in private for 2 years, and she had come to Atlanta in new shoes she had bought herself, with a family she loved, for a man she was still trying to make happy, and nobody in that studio knew any of it. The fast money round had gone well until it didn't. Derek scored 192 points. Ciara went second, and the board was stingy. 2 of her 5 answers registered, for a combined 14 points. Final total, 206. The prize required 200 to win. They had it. But Derek had been watching the board with the familiar tight expression, the one that had nothing to do with the game and everything to do with what came before the game, and when the 5th answer registered at 0, he turned to Ciara and said, in the voice he used when they were at home, the low, controlled voice that she had learned to monitor the way people monitor the horizon for weather, "You cost us the bonus round." Ciara started to say something. He raised his hand. He did not complete the motion. Steve Harvey's 6 words, "Not here. Security, call the police," were not loud. They did not need to be. They had the quality of something inevitable, something that had been building toward this exact sentence for longer than anyone in the room understood, and the room felt it even without knowing the specific backstory. The security guards were professional and direct. Derek Simmons was walked off the stage in approximately 90 seconds. The curtain closed. The studio settled into the kind of silence that comes after something has been definitively stopped. Steve Harvey did not go immediately to Kiara. He stood in the center of the stage for a moment, with his back to the cameras, composing himself. Not for long. Then he walked to her. She was standing at the podium with both hands flat on its surface. Her mother Yvonne had moved beside her. Her brothers Marcus and Darnell were directly behind her, the particular physical presence of men who love someone and have just understood something they wish they had understood sooner. Kiara was not crying. She was very still, and the stillness was the stillness of a woman who has survived by going still, who has spent 2 years managing unpredictability by becoming as predictable and motionless as possible. Steve looked at her. He did not speak immediately. He let the silence be what it needed to be. Then Ciara. She looked at him. "How long?" he said. She knew what he was asking. She looked at her mother. She looked at her brothers. And in the looking at them, in the reading of their faces, the devastation on Yvonne's face, the rage barely contained on Marcus's, the particular expression on Darnell's of a man who is just now understanding something that will change him, Ciara Washington made a decision. The decision that had been approaching for 2 years, circling, landing and taking off again, finally landed and stayed. 2 years, she said. The studio fell completely silent. 2 years, Steve said. He did not editorialize. He let it sit. Then he looked at the camera. He looked at the audience. He looked at every person who was watching, who would ever watch, who might be Ciara Washington or might love someone who was. "I want to say something," he said. "And I want to say it clearly, so there is no ambiguity about where I stand. What just happened on this stage, a man raising his hand toward the woman who organized this entire trip for him, who bought him shoes, who made his dream happen, that is not a bad day. That is not a temper issue. That is abuse. That word, abuse, I want everyone watching at home to sit with it. Not he has a problem. Not they have a complicated relationship. Abuse. That is the word. And the first step toward leaving it behind is calling it the right thing." The audience was motionless. "I know something about this from the other direction," Steve said. His voice was quieter now, more personal. "I watched my mother absorb things she should not have absorbed. I watched her stay in situations that cost her. And I watched her eventually find her way out, because she had children, and because she decided that what her children saw her accept was what they would believe they deserved. Ciara, you are a teacher. You have students watching you, and you get to decide what lesson you teach them about what a woman accepts." Ciara Washington looked at Steve Harvey with the expression of a person who has just been handed the exact key for the exact lock they have been standing in front of for 2 years. Something opened in her face. Not dramatically. Quietly. The way doors open when you have finally found the right key. But Steve wasn't done. He called on speaker, a domestic violence legal aid organization in Atlanta. He arranged for a full legal consultation for Ciara, not a hotline, not a pamphlet, a named attorney with a scheduled appointment, within 48 hours. He then called a housing resource coordinator in Atlanta and arranged for an emergency private housing assessment for Ciara, independent of whatever her current living situation was, with no obligation and complete confidentiality. He did all of this on speaker, in front of the room, clearly, one step at a time. He wanted Kiara to hear every commitment made in real time. He wanted her to leave the building with something that was real and immediate, not aspirational. He turned to Tasha, Ciara's college roommate, who had been standing in the family section with the expression of a woman processing both grief and her own culpability in equal measure. "Tasha," Steve said, "she's going to need you." Tasha nodded. She crossed the stage and stood beside her friend and took her hand. She did not say anything. She didn't have to. He turned to the competing family, the Newen family from Savannah, Georgia, who had been standing at their podium in complete, respectful stillness for the last 18 minutes. He looked at their team captain, a 39-year-old woman named Lynn Nguyen. Lynn said, "Both families." "Please," Steve turned to the audience, "both families go home with the full prize today." He paused, because this woman made a decision today. And I want her to know, and I want everyone watching to know, that the decision she made on this stage today is worth far more than $20,000. Outside the studio, in the security holding area, Derek Simmons sat with 2 Atlanta Police Department officers. Ciara pressed charges. This time, there was no withdrawal. Derek Simmons was cited for attempted assault. He was required, as part of a deferred prosecution agreement, to complete 26 weeks of domestic violence intervention programming and 1 year of supervised probation. The episode aired February 4, 2020. By the end of the first day, 88 million views. Within 6 weeks, 290 million. The clip of Steve Harvey's 6 words, "Not here." Security, call the police, was played in domestic violence awareness seminars in 23 states. It was used in law enforcement training, in workplace HR modules, in middle school health education curricula. The National Domestic Violence Hotline reported a 34% increase in calls during the 2 weeks following the episode's airing. Several callers specifically mentioned having seen the clip. 3 months after the taping, Ciara Washington had completed her legal consultations, secured independent housing, and ended her relationship with Derek Simmons. She described the period as the hardest 6 weeks of her adult life, and the most important. 6 months after the taping, she was back in her classroom. She had incorporated a unit into her 10th grade curriculum, 4 sessions, optional for students, on healthy relationships, power dynamics, and what warning signs look like before they escalate. She called the unit Recognizing the Pattern. She ran it every semester. 17 of her students have approached her privately after completing the unit to discuss situations in their own lives or the lives of people they knew. A year after the taping, Ciara Washington appeared at a domestic violence awareness fundraiser in Atlanta. She was asked to speak. She said, "I organized the trip. I bought the shoes. I made the dream happen, because that is what I thought love required, giving everything until there was nothing left to give. What I understand now is that love should make you more, not less. It should add to what you are, not take from it." Today, the Harvey Safe Door Initiative, funded partly from the onstage phone call, operates domestic violence, legal aid, and housing assessment services in 6 cities, with a 48-hour intake guarantee. To date, 2,200 individuals have passed through its doors. The initiative's motto is taken directly from Steve's words on the stage that afternoon. That is the word. And the first step is calling it the right thing. Ciara Washington still teaches math. She still makes things happen for the people she loves. The difference now is that she is on the list of people she loves. If this story about Kiara's decision and the afternoon that made it possible moved you, subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. Share this with someone who needs to hear that love should make you more, not less. Do you know someone in a situation like this? Please share the resources in the description below. Ring the notification bell for more stories about the moments that finally give people permission to choose themselves.